is up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of Avenue A, where we talk acting, networking, and the industry. I'm your host, Kelsey Bentz, and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. For those who are tuning in for the first time, welcome. So happy to have you. Avenue A is a platform that I created to connect with my fellow artists and stay growing and stay learning during this strange time of isolation. So welcome. And for those who are returning viewers, welcome back. Love you. Hi, Grandma. Thanks for tuning in. I love your bumper music. Thank you so much. You got to get hyped. You know what I mean? You got to end the Friday with a little hype music, I think. So let's just jump right into it. I have a really exciting guest on tonight. His name is Rick Rider, and Rick is a vocal coach in NYC, and I'm really excited to talk to him today because I haven't had any vocal coaches on Avenue A yet, so I think it's going to be a really fun episode. So before I bring Rick on, I'm just going to give a little introduction for him, read his bio, and then we'll jump right in. So Rick Rider is a voice trainer and Broadway veteran who has sold out NYC's best cabarets and lent his voice to radio, television, and feature films. Hailed by Variety as a truly thrilling singer, some highlights of Rick's performance career include starring opposite singer-songwriting legend Carole King in Blood Brothers, Grease with Rosie O'Donnell, Bill Finn's A New Brain at Lincoln Center, and the Dreamgirls' 20th anniversary concert on Broadway. Rick began his teaching career in 1999 with a single voice student at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts Cap 21 Musical Theater Conservatory degree program, back when NYU Tisch was with Cap 21. And then he went on to hone his teaching and piano skills at NYU's Cap 21 for the next 6 years, teaching his own vocal performance, audition technique, small vocal technique classes, and coaching those students privately while often performing 8 shows a week at the same time. Insane. For 20 years now, Rick has trained pop music careers and helped Tony Award-winning singers maintain their voices. So I'm super excited to bring Rick on. Hi, Marissa. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I was feeling very fall, feeling very coordinated. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, without further ado, let's welcome on Rick Rider. Hi, Rick.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for joining me tonight.
I'm so glad to be here.
It's really an honor. I'm very excited to delve into this interview because you have such a breadth of experience, and I'm specifically interested in your start as a performer on Broadway, and then your move into voice coach and training other Broadway performers. Mm-hmm. And you've also worked alongside some really iconic people, which is so fantastic. So just to start us off, can you talk a little bit about your transition from performing to coaching and what inspired that shift in your career?
Okay. So that's not a short answer.
I'm sure it's not.
So everybody get your popcorn, have a seat, because it was completely unplanned. I was doing a concert. I was like one of maybe 15 singers, and we were, and everybody got on stage like at one time, and the rest of us were kind of sitting to stage right and stage left, but you could be seen. And I was sitting next to Alex Corey, who was last seen on Broadway as Yenta in this last revival of Fiddler on the Roof. Mm. She has a long Broadway career. She lives in Los Angeles now. But at the time, she was the vice chair of music and voice, I think they called it, at Cap 21. Okay. And she literally was just like, she was like, "Hey, do you want to teach at NYU?" And I'm like, "Hey, no, I don't." And I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to teach. Yeah. So she asked me again, and I said yes. And what it was is that a lot of universities do this. They called it at Cap 21, or maybe NYU, I guess, Spring in New York, and it's a visiting junior in their spring semester. And this one student was coming from Northwestern in Chicago, and none of the other voice teachers wanted to invest in someone for a semester. So they needed a voice teacher to come on. And I think now that I kind of know the business a little bit, it was an opportunity for them to test somebody out, another voice teacher. So anyway, I took her on, and that was kind of unremarkable, not because of her, not because of me, but just that relation. I really didn't know how to teach voice. And what did happen was the head of the music department, of the voice and music department, Wendy Waterman, asked me if I could substitute teach a vocal performance class. And that is, for anybody who might not know that's listening, that's when an actor has a song memorized and they're up on their feet. There's a pianist in the room, and then there's a teacher, and you workshop the song. And, you know, there can be varying themes or whatever it is, you know, however the teacher works. So I had never done that before either. And I was like, Wendy, what do I do? And she said, well, just take your experience into the room. I mean, she wasn't dismissing me, and she wasn't by far saying that's all I needed to do, but you know, they needed a teacher to substitute teach this class. Yeah. I said yes. And I'm like, okay, now what do I do? So I go in, and I could see what I wanted to work on, but I didn't really have language for it. I didn't have process for it. I didn't understand. I was, you know, I could see that I wanted, you know, certain things to change, and I would offer those added suggestions, and then the opposite would happen. You know, it's like I didn't get process, which is the way to easily sort of boil that down. Yeah. Anyway, they offered me that went okay. And they asked me to substitute teach a couple of other vocal performance classes. And I mean, in those classes, Stephanie Germanotta was in one of them, aka Lady Gaga. Matt Morrison was in one of them as well. And I was just like, hi, I'm Rick Ryder. I'm in The Music Man on Broadway. I've never taught before in my life.
That is so amazing. Wow, I'm sure of that.
So that's kind of how it started. And I did not think about, you know, I would become a teacher. I didn't even really consider myself a teacher. I would say, oh, I'm teaching at NYU. I didn't start calling myself a teacher really until like maybe the last decade, honestly, and that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So the two things coexisted. Cap 21 kept offering me work, and during their summer conservatory, I was offered my own classes, so I got to do them from start to finish. And you know what I realized was that I still kind of didn't know a lot about process, and the teachers there were so wonderful. Most of them were actors, and they invited me to come in and observe them. And so I watched them, and that's really how I learned to teach primarily at first. But every time I would book a gig, there were times when, as you said in my bio, I was doing 8 shows a week and teaching, but if it was too much, I would drop the teaching. They would get it. They were cool. They wanted to have working actors as their teachers. And so there was a seminal moment. I'm cutting like way far. I'm cutting like 10 years from then. And I was working. I met Chet Walker, who is a choreographer and a dance mentor, guru, historian, particularly in American jazz dance. And he was nominated for a Tony for his work, his choreographic work, on this last revival of Pippin on Broadway, is who he is. And he was the artistic director at Jacob's Pillow, a big dance festival in the Berkshires. And he had a 3-week musical theater program, and he wanted to teach those dancers to sing. We met because I was invited up as an actor, as a Broadway guest, to open their gala.
Okay.
And so he and I shared a dressing room. And I was like, oh, by the way, I teach. I still wasn't like, I'm a teacher. I was, I teach. And he's like, well, I want to teach these dancers to sing. Let's talk. And so we talked for that was the end of the summer. So this wasn't going to happen again until the next year.
Yeah.
And so we talked various times over the year. We got along well. He invited me to come teach there. And I was about to get to be offered a gig, I thought, a production of what's it called? Next to Normal, which I would love to have done, but it was a very short gig and it completely conflicted with this. And I took myself out of the running. I don't know if I would have gotten that production of Next to Normal or not, but I took myself out of it to do this teaching gig. That was a moment that I was like, ooh,
the priorities are shifting.
Yeah, I'm doing this. I'm really doing this. And so from there, I had to learn how to be a better voice teacher, because at that point I was good, but I wasn't great. And if I was going to work with really good people who had the potential to be great, I had to be great, too. Yeah. And so that started the journey of my pedagogical search
Wow.
and working with mentors and other teachers. And
Wow.
I think that's the answer to your question.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, that's a beautiful arc of just like, I'm sure there's so much more inside of those, 20 years that's brought you to now. But I love hearing about defining moments that you can specifically remember. Like when the first time you chose to take the teaching gig over the performing gig, that's really fascinating. And that's definitely it sounds like a defining moment for you in your career.
Yeah, it was. Totally was.
So coaching Broadway performers and, high level, high caliber performers in general means helping them, survive and thrive during grueling schedules. I mean, you knew that firsthand doing 8 shows a week on Broadway as a performer. And you obviously had clients who were doing that same schedule. So how did your experience and how does your experience as a performer lend itself to your coaching?
It's everything is the
I'm
short
sure.
answer.
Yeah.
In detail, and I preface it too, because in my search to understand on a base level why I'm doing what I'm doing as a teacher, what works and why does it work, I am also mixing my own experience, which I started to make my own money as an actor when I was 11. I booked a commercial.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. I booked this live event. It was like what we call industrial, like, business theater. It was an industrial is what it was. And so that's a lot that parlayed into that particular industrial just caught fire. Not to go into sort of boring detail, but it caught fire and it was my job. I bought like 2 cars. When I turned 6, I bought my first 2 cars with this money. I paid for some of my own college. That was my job. And so I was a working actor and I had to learn how to be responsible going to public school, every day. And then being responsible to my job at night and kind of being a kid at the same time. And it was an interesting sort of, juggle of things. I learned all these tricks that my students, like in their 20s, once they've graduated from college or learning in college, that I learned them then, at 13, 14, 15. I learned about, face vaporizers and humidifiers and, over-the-counter meds, how we're going to like dry up the mucus or are we going to thin out the mucus? I mean, I've known that stuff for so long. And what happens if you start coughing and, you're standing off stage, you're ready to go on, or you're in a voice lesson and you swallow the wrong way. And it's like, that could like blow the next half an hour of your lesson. There's a way to get through it. Maybe. Yeah. There's a good possibility I can help you get through that because I've been doing it since I was a kid. Wow. Wow. So it's really a mix of both of those things. And that journey's not really over. The personal experience journey isn't over either, but the pedagogical experience is not over. I have a teacher. I still take a lesson on a regular basis, although I haven't during the pandemic. I'm a studious, nerdy student of vocal pedagogy, of vocal science. I love it. I'm in webinars. I am part of collectives that meet on a regular basis with otolaryngologists and speech pathologists. All of this kind of goes back to your first question, like also over time, Kelsey, like I'm very ambitious. I always have been. And my sense of enthusiasm and my, this could be a whole other conversation, but my need to be very good. Not just like sort of good, but like really good. All those things have shifted from being an actor to being a voice teacher, my ego, the whole thing, everything's involved in it. I bet.
Rick, I respect that so much. I love hearing about like longtime teachers and educators
Let me see if I get this on the screen. Coconut water. This is a new, speaking of personal experience, this is my new elixir, everyone. Coconut water. Have you ever, do you know throat coat, the tea throat coat?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it kind of tastes like tree bark, which I kind of like for some reason. And I'm going to say that.
You know, it's healing you.
I just like it though. I'm like, I kind of like that. Oops, let's get in here. This is sort of the cold version of that. I find coconut water without anything else in it, unsweetened, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I find it to be very soothing. And I drink this throughout my teaching day.
Wow. Okay. You've inspired me. I've known about that brand. I just have never given it any thought.
I do not endorse this particular brand, Vita COC coconut water. I don't necessarily.
Well, maybe you're about to. If anyone from Vita Coco is watching.
Oh, Josephita, thank you. That's so sweet.
One of the best in the game, hands down. That's amazing. Thanks for.
But your hands are up, Joseph.
Hands down.
Look at that picture of him. He's so cute.
So
oh my God, that's a great picture. Look at that.
What a headshot. What a headshot.
He's Canadian. He's nice.
Oh, I'm half Canadian.
He's a nice Canadian guy.
I love that. So Rick,
now we all don't have to move there. Okay, let's not get political.
Right.
Go on. Sorry. There must be caffeine in the coconut water. Go ahead.
It's Friday night. You know what? Anything goes. I love hearing longtime educators and teachers who are open about their own growth and their own education. I love hearing when teachers are also learning and taking classes and is always expanding their craft and their knowledge. Because I think that's what life is, we're never done. And just because, you have a long career and you've already done a lot of stuff and you already have a lot of experience doesn't mean that there's not more to gain and more experience to have and more, wisdom out there that you haven't been exposed to yet. So I wanted to say that, and that I think that's so cool that you shared that.
Oh, thank you. What was I going to say? You reminded me of something. My friends and my family are shooting texts in, and then they're
you. You're on the air.
I'm on the air. Oh shoot! I don't know what I was going to say. I was answering the email of a mother to a mom's email to me. I teach her 16-year-old daughter, and she was asking, the college questions, and her questions are do you think she can make a living? She was asking the bottom line questions. Do you think my daughter can make a living in this business?
Yeah.
And that's so easy to answer. I don't know.
Right.
You know what I mean? I have no idea. And what I ended up writing, because I hear her concerns as a parent, they're all the same. They just want their children to succeed, and they want their children to be successful. They want their children to be happy. And what I can understand is very difficult for a parent is the idea of a second career or a third career, a first life, a second life, even a first act, second act, third act. I'm in my second act. And it's no more or less painful than any other thing that's going to come up in life.
Yeah.
If I dare say, it's sort of kind of courageous, and I don't really think of myself this way, as necessarily courageous, but I think in retro, I say to other people who've changed their careers, when I was having been an actor for so long, I've watched my colleagues change their careers my entire career.
Right. I've
watched that happen.
Yeah.
And it used to really rattle me, because I would think, why? Why are you doing that? What's wrong? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And what is that? And then of course I think about me, what does that mean about, should I change my career?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's am I doing okay? Are they the smart ones?
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to sort of relay that to that mom, and any mom or dad that might be listening to this or not, or just actor, man, if this is what you want to do it, because nothing's forever.
Right.
I don't want to change the course of this conversation. Sorry.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that. And that actually kind of leads me to my next question. So like,
Oh, good.
It sounds like, you have a variety of different students who are, invested in different levels and are maybe at different skill levels and training levels. So does your teaching style differ from student to student? And can you talk about like how you personalize your coaching experience to meet the specific performer's needs and goals?
Good question. That's a great question.
Thanks.
It's sort of like an audition. As soon as a student is on the screen now, because it's all virtual.
Yes.
Hey, listen, we've come a long way, baby.
We sure have. I just can't fully get over it.
And it's temporary, but this virtual thing's not going anywhere because boy, is it handy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, this is pretty good what we're doing, right here. Anyway, as soon as a student walks in, let's gets on the screen or walks in the room, it's like an audition. I'm looking at everything.
Wow.
And it's just, it's my curiosity. I mean, you have to have curiosity to do all of this. Empathy and curiosity extends to teaching just as an actor. You have to have those two qualities in order to succeed. You watch people fall apart without them. And I pretty much teach the same way. The technique stays the same. Right. Doesn't make a difference if the only thing that's the exception is a classical singer or an opera singer. Sure. And that's called crossover training. And I do that. And that's super specific to them. And I'm really not giving them, I'm giving them a variation. I'm working in a variation of what it is I do. That's very specific to their need.
Okay.
But in terms of all the other voices, Broadway, pop, young, old, experienced, inexperienced, I'm going to work the same way with what it is I hear coming out of their mouth and emanating from their body.
Okay.
It's all the same. I might treat them differently, and that's just psychic. Do you know what I mean? That's just like, sort of like seeing what's coming from them psychically.
Yeah.
What kind of a person they are. I remember when I was at NYU, the head of the eventual head of the department said something to me about, and I don't think it was based on it wasn't based on a complaint. It was based on, she observed me, and she observed that I kind of treated the boys and the girls the same in her estimation.
Okay.
And I was confused when I first saw it. But young men and women are very different, and young, teenage boys and teenage girls, they're very different. And that came back to me later. I don't know that I was really able to incorporate it a lot or a little at the time, and things continued to go well. But when I was in a period in my career where I was teaching a lot of teenagers, and I recalled it. And I do kind of tend to play with the boys a little bit more because I'm a guy, and I kind of remember what that was like. And I sort of get like when they're like really super comfortable with goofing around, and it's different for girls. Yeah. Not that you can't do that with them.
Right.
But that came up for me in your question.
That's interesting.
So that's not quite like that's a little bit of an answer to your question. You said goals and such.
Yeah. Because you mentioned before that you are very ambitious and goal-oriented, and that's part of your personality. So, like, how does that part of you, work with students who have differing levels of goals or, like, differing, because not everyone's very ambitious or goal-oriented. So, like, how do you work with that?
So that was a real slow melt.
I bet.
That was a real slow melt because I've done this for a living. And so my consciousness took time to change, and it has. And now I have students who have full-time jobs and something else and have no plan to pursue this as a career at all.
Got it. Okay.
And so it's really difficult to sit down and practice if you don't have a goal.
Yeah.
And I used to think that it was a wash if you didn't have a goal. and it's not. And so what I finally have started doing with these students, and they've stuck around because those students would eventually stop studying.
Right.
Now I've got a little collection of students who've been that are not in the business. Maybe a couple of them were in the business,
Okay.
and so I still treat it completely differently. I'm like, just come to your lesson and let us work out what needs to be worked out during the lesson.
Yeah.
Let's have it is an hour. You get to put everything aside, and we just get to work on singing. And so indeed, I look closely at some things and less closely at others because it's them. Because I want that hour for them to be, I want it to be enjoyable, and I want them to feel like we've gotten somewhere and they've done something.
And I bet that they feel less, they probably don't come into their lesson feeling like guilty that they didn't do their like outside work, or like feeling, because like when you have a student where you're like, okay, like this is what you should be getting done, like can you go work on it, and then they don't really want to, so then they don't do it, and then they come back to their lesson and they're like, well, I didn't really, like it sounds like you're able to sort of avoid that with these types of students where you're just like, just come to the hour and we'll get it done.
Yeah. And it does. I mean, your question is really specific and good. And so, yes, I treat them very differently, and they're not getting anything less.
Okay.
I'm not letting something slide.
Yeah.
I'm not letting something slide.
Mm-hmm.
There is, and I have to repeat it every lesson until they finally let go of, I didn't practice, I didn't look at my music. I'm like, don't worry about it. Let's work on that song that you actually know. If you haven't looked at the other one, let's not look at it. Yeah. And actually that applies to anybody. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna torture somebody with a song they don't know.
That is so amazing, because that's productivity right there. Like there's no point, if you didn't work on it, like
that's actually it, is to be that it's been productive, that it's been productive no matter who they are.
Yeah.
Another piece of your question, because Kelsey sent me these questions ahead of time and I looked at them. It reminded me of another seminal moment. I have a student, her name is Melanie Moore. And Melanie was Hava in this Fiddler on the Roof. She's had a long Broadway career. She's made her Broadway debut in Finding Neverland. She was Ermengarde in Hello, Dolly with Bette Midler. And she won I've forgotten which season, like 6 or 7 or 8 of So You Think You Can Dance.
Okay.
She's a phenomenal dancer and a phenomenal singer, as it turns out. And she was really close to Hava in Fiddler. And she was supposed to go into her last call and like get it or not get it. And because I've been doing this, like I know some of the creative team. I know Ted Sperling, who was the music supervisor, and that was supposed to be it. That was supposed to be the last call. Well, they wanted to hear one more time.
And that's probably after like 7 callbacks already.
Do you know what I mean? And it probably didn't have something else probably changed or could have changed. You just never know that has anything to do with you. And they're like, she mentioned having worked on it with her voice teacher.
Okay.
And which remained nameless. She just left it at voice teacher, as one would in the room. And so the directive from Bart LeChair, the director, and Ted Sperling was to take it back to your teacher and work on this particular section.
Okay.
And we'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
And so she came in and she told me that. I was like, oh my God. Okay. You're coming back to your voice teacher. That's the directive. They want nothing more from you than to work on this section with your voice teacher. And this is what they want. So, okay, let's do that.
No pressure.
And she booked it,
Yes.
So
that's
anyway,
fantastic.
That made me think of that as well.
I love that story. That's so cool. Oh my gosh, we're almost out of time. I have one last question for you. I have to get this in. Obviously, we're all living through this current moment of longing, for the days past of Broadway as we knew it. But I'm wondering what you see as the future of Broadway. And then additionally, how are you helping your students and your clients stay ready for the return?
That's ongoing because the virus is a living, breathing thing.
Sure
And so
is.
it just keeps changing. And I don't know, maybe it's changing too. But it certainly is, changing and altering us.
Yeah.
So what am I doing I'm just making it active. We continue to search for new music and work on new music. I'm not blowing smoke. I'm not talking about, auditions. I mean, at first, because this thing unfolded the same for everybody. Like, at first it was like, oh, a little rest. And then it was like, okay, so listen, let's stay focused because you're going to be auditioning, come like the beginning of May.
Right.
And then, like, listen, come beginning of September, this thing's happening. And a couple of things started auditioning.
Yeah. And shooting and stuff like that.
And then television and television heated up, and that started happening. And so there was reason, to believe that there was momentum. Well, I think, there's not a lot of momentum for live performance right now.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
And so we're just working on, we're continuing I'm continuing to train their voice. We're continuing to search for music. I'm just going deeper into, I'm talking a little bit more. I'm talking about technique because actually I find my students kind of like it.
Yeah.
I used to be more of the mind of, listen, you don't really need to know this, just do this.
Yeah.
But now I talk a lot more about why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Because we got the time.
Yeah. You can like luxuriate in the process while there's less pressure of like the product.
And also, listen, Atrophy, in this meeting that I went to, this collective, it meets like every 6 weeks. And this was our first one since the pandemic started. And it's 5 of the major teaching hospitals in New York City. And they all work with the professional voice. NYU, the Sean Parker Institute, Columbia. These are major otolaryngologists that work with, major professional voice users. And so part of the conversation is that, COVID underuse and abuse of the voice is real. And I'm dealing with it all the time because my students are getting jobs that are now doing, they have their fitness jobs and they kind of got the fitness jobs in person down, like a little bit less strain on the voice. And we've been able to work with that. Zoom has brought it all back.
Wow.
So people know how to they don't have any sort of check about how loud they are.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And and these and the microphone and it's breaking and then there's then there's technological interference and stuff. Yeah. There's that. And then there's the underuse of the voice. Yeah. And atrophy is real, even in a younger person.
You have to full days without speaking and like not even notice it. I mean, that happens to me. Sometimes I like won't say a word to anyone until like 2 p.m. And I'm like, this is bad.
Today was that day and I knew I had to do this and I just vocalized more because I know how to get through it singing. So like about 7:30, I sat down and sang for like 5 minutes or something like that.
That's so smart. Yeah.
Just to get it going.
I actually did that too before this interview. That's so funny. I was like, I'm just going to sing through a couple songs.
Yeah.
Wow. Rick, this interview has been so enriching and just lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your expertise and your background and experience with us. It was such a pleasure.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
This time really flew by. I mean, I feel like we could just talk for hours, but
I know I could.
I definitely could listen for forever. So, we got a good thing going here. But right. I will let you go. I will let you enjoy your evening. Thank you so much. For those who are watching, you can find Rick on his website, rickrider.com, or you can also find him on Instagram at Rider VoiceWorks. So those are where you can see him. Thanks again, Rick, for joining me. It was so lovely. Thank you.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Take care.
You too.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. So great. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in, Jeff. It was so cool to see you in the comments. Karen, very fun. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I feel like we got so many comments. Yay. Patrick. Oh, so many Rick fans. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. That's a wrap on another episode. Stay tuned for our announcement for next week. We're doing something a little bit different. It's Thanksgiving weekend, so I'm not having a guest on, but I think I'm still going to have an episode. So stay tuned for the announcement on what that's going to be. Could be something kind of fun. Anyway, enjoy your evening. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great weekend.